Does anyone remember the Oneided line?
Yes.
TV program. Well, this is the Oneided line for the Southern Caribbean. I was inspired to start collecting these in April this year by Simon Goldblatt's release of the Derek Nathan Venezuelan stamps, although largely Venezuelan here, forming part of the Caribbean. And I was intrigued because these really are buccaneers. They're all connected with ship-owning captains of a particularly enterprising kind. I don't know where James Podger is. Yes. Well, you know, Captain James Podger will be able to tell me if I make a mistake about these. They're all mid-Victorian paddle steamers to a boat, to a ship, of between about 60 and 250 tons. And when you think that they were making regular crossings of up to 180 miles in storms and rough seas, that was quite intrepid. And they were mostly part owned by the master, who was part ship owner, and by the merchants whose interests he was serving. I started with the St. Lucia Steam Conveyance Company. These look terribly false, but they're not actually, they're quite genuine. And they date from 1871, 1872. There are two sets of them. There's a really very difficult first set, which always comes with a thick brown gun. And the standard work, which is very old now, Ringstrom and Tester, says that they're all uncommon, particularly in multiples. And it said that the three, so threepence, that is to say, is thought to exist. Well, it does, and there it is. So he was quite right, and they were quite right. This was a Captain Thomas Shug, who bought a small steamer of 60 tons called the Penelope, in order to connect Castries, the main port in St. Lucia, with the outports, because there was no service, there were no roads, mountainous island, they couldn't get about the island, so he bought that. Penelope within a year went aground and sank, and poor Captain Shug died immediately, presumably of a broken heart, or a broken bank balance, I'm not sure which. So those are the stamps. These are complete panes, almost certainly lithographed in Paris for Captain Shug, who ordered them, and no doubt bore the pain of paying for them. Next is, and you must forgive me, this is not the British Commonwealth here, but it is so intimately connected. And this really obeys a call to arms of Graham's yesterday, that we should try and collect in themes, not just in countries. So this is part of the theme. This is the St. Thomas La Guaira Puerto Caballo private ship service, which dates from, I've got to read my own notes to do this, from the 1840s, and succeeded when the Royal Mail Steam Packet Company ceased its service to Venezuela. Captain Robert Todd stepped in with a ship which eponymously called the Robert Todd, and he plied the triangle between the two main ports of Caribbean ports of Venezuela and St. Thomas, and that was a 180-mile transit. It's a big one. It's quite interesting, philatelically, it's quite interesting in one particular way. The stamps that were issued in Venezuela are different in colour from the same values issued in St. Thomas. And the reason was that people were busy arbitraging the currency. In one place, it was 8 reales to the peso, and at the other end, it was 10 reales to the peso. And peso, of course, means weight, and it's a coin which is measured in value by its weight in gold. Real means royal, and there were 10 reales or 8 reales, depending on where you were, to the peso, and 100 centavos or 100 parts to the real. So you have the St. Thomas ones and you have the Venezuelan ones here, and I presume it was successful, but interesting way to prevent fraud. And these all came from Simon's auction in April this year, to which I would pay tribute and urge you to buy in it. There are wonderful things always to buy in Simon's auctions, and these were mostly Derek Nathan, and I've added somewhat to them since. Here's a complete sheet of he sold the ship to a company called, I don't know whether it was a Spanish company, in which case it would be Jesurun, or it was a Dutch company, in which case, or Danish company, in which case it would be Jesurun and Zoon. And they went to Waterloo and said they wanted their own their own name on the stamps. So this is the second series of stamps here. It's a complete sheet, and these are the various values. And one is able to identify which end of the route that they were cancelled in by the type of cancellation. These are the centavo issues, which we use for newspapers and such like. And these are reprints, rather horrible things, but they're quite useful because they're actually reprinted and show the layout of the original lithograph sheets if one is looking for flaws. Here is an interloper, which is the British post offices in Venezuela, which actually are astonishingly difficult to find. Here is a very pretty pair of the shilling GB cancelled by the Crown Circle for paid at La Guaira in Venezuela. Here is actually the strike that was used in volume 20 of, again bought from Simon, volume 20 of the SG catalogue for La Guaira, the circular date stamp, and 2 for Ciudad Bolivar, which they used on 4pence value, 4pence GB values. The RMSPP, Royal Mail Steam Packet Company, lost, in the early 1870s, lost a lot of its contract, particularly for inter-island mails. And they decided that the only way that they could enforce prepayment of letters between the inter-island ports was to issue their own stamp. So they got Delarue to print them, and it's a single value of 10 cents, which varies quite a lot in shades, and there's a sort of slight variation in shades there. The used ones are extraordinarily difficult to find. I don't know why, and I've had greatest difficulty. I've only so far found 3. There's a complete pane or a complete sheet. And then finally...
the reason is I've got them.
Oh, have you? I'll have to be nicer to you. And finally, Lady MacLeod, which was, of course, a Captain Boyce. And very tactfully, he named his ship after the governor's wife, Lady MacLeod. And that's a paddle steamer of, I can't remember how many tons, it's not a big one. It's certainly less than, it's 109 feet in length. So we think probably, what, 150, 160 tons, James? A paddler. This is an unused one. They were lithographed locally, probably from a steel engraved die engraved by Petit, who was in the island at the time, and who unfortunately, in the middle of printing the lithograph postage stamps, died on a voyage to New York. There's an awful lot of death in these things. Here is a cover. I think these covers are very interesting. There are probably 30 of them,
Yeah,
Peter?
30, 40.
Between 30 and 40.
Yeah.
And they are expensive because everybody collects them. Collectors of SG1, collectors of ships on stamps. It's the first stamp ever issued in the British Empire outside the United Kingdom. So there's a lot of interest in them, which is why they fetch silly prices. So unused, on cover, and for the first time, actually, when I was putting this little tiny display together, I looked at the contents, and they're actually very interesting. There was obviously a family quarrel. They're all between the partners in Taylor, Graham and Angus in Port of Spain and in San Fernando, which is where the Lady MacLeod plied between the two. And they obviously had hardware shops. They had a main office in Port of Spain, then opened another one in San Fernando. And he's talking about the difficulty of getting shades, by that I think he means sunblinds, of the right size. And there's quite an interesting thing on his takings in the letter. And here is a forgery. I went to the Royal Philatelic Society and said, I'd like a certificate for a forgery, please. And so they said in their usual, you what? But they gave me one. And amongst these things here is a letter from Sir Edward Bacon, who had corresponded with Taylor in Trinidad on the subject of this particular stamp, and includes a chapter. This is his book, which he sent a paper-bound copy to Taylor in Port of Spain, and Taylor had it rather beautifully bound, had it at the printery in Port of Spain, and the letter was enclosed when I bought it again at Simon's auction 25 years ago. And it's a very interesting letter from Sir Edward Bacon to the son of the original man in Taylor, Graham and Angus. And the final item, these are all sort of memorabilia around the Lady MacLeod. And this is a Great Britain letter card, which are not altogether common, postmarked Crieff on the 5th of June 1893, and it's from Erskine Beveridge, trippingly named, to W.J. Wilson, a Birmingham stamp dealer. It's very short, it's worth reading the contents just gently to you. Scots in the room will have to forgive the accent. He says, Arden Moor, Crieff, 5th of June 1893. Dear Sir, thanks for yours with the Lady MacLeod stamp. Very satisfactory. They seem to have usually escaped obliteration, which has been forwarded on to me here. I return home in a fortnight. Yours very truly, Erskine Beveridge.
Not bad.
So there we are.